Pokemon is a series defined by stagnation, by stillness. A series that does not want to move forwards, as doing so would be to throw away most of its identity out of necessity. Pokemon Sword and Shield came out to a middling reception at best, and BDSP, despite its competency at recreating Diamond and Pearl, were met with outright vitriol from the community. Pokemon fans have made it abundantly clear that the direction this series was going in ever since Sun and Moon was not something to be celebrated. To escape this rut, Pokemon would need to do something truly special. Pokemon Legends Arceus is the shot in the arm the series truly needed. Yes, it might still only have 200 some odd Pokemon. Yes, it can still be completed in under 30 hours if you really rush through it. And yeah, there's no multiplayer battling. It's far more of an experiment than a mainline game, which is why BDSP came out in the first place, to give players a far more classic and standard Pokemon experience than what we've had since 2018. Legends is so different from everything the series has seen in the past, and the level of consistency and quality is on par with some of Nintendo's best Switch games, and I say that with over 300 hours of Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade to my name. As someone who spent the past week doing almost nothing but playing the League for over 35 hours, even basically missing school to get this out on time, I felt the need to talk about it. This game is an important turning point for the franchise, and it's a direction I'd like to see get fleshed out a lot more as time goes on. But really, what makes Legends Arceus so important? What makes it so great? What about it is the kind of Pokemon experience that people have been wanting, really ever since the GameCube? Well, for now at least, we'll start with the story as a jumping off point to explain what makes Arceus just so different. The story starts out with the player being whisked away from their bed by Arceus to the past and told to catch all Pokemon. This isn't just a whimsical Peter Pan moment, however. There are real consequences to Arceus' decision, meaning this 15-year-old child has no home they can return to, no family they can ask for help, and no money to survive. The game's Professor Laventon finds you washed up and decides to help you out by giving you promise of a job in the town where he lives and nothing more. You're immediately treated with suspicion at best and active distrust at worst, and you're told to make a living working for bosses there or starve and get mauled in the wild. This isn't a world that the player can just simply cross the entirety of when they're 10 years old. There's threats and stakes involved. This isn't yet the Pokemon utopia that we all know. The only thing you have to your name is a talent for catching and battling Pokemon, which is, thankfully, something this land is in desperate need of. As a side note, I think it's pretty heavily implied that you're the champion from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. The game says that you're 15, and it time travels you while you look suspiciously like Lucas and Dawn, and you have an obvious talent for catching and training Pokemon, unlike the rest of even the modern Pokemon world. I don't know, just a neat little bit of headcanon. From there, the Galaxy team that runs Jubilee Village tells you to catch Pokemon in the wild to complete the Pokedex and calm frenzied noble Pokemon, historic monsters who are guardians for the Diamond and Pearl clans, two historically warring factions with distinct political and religious tensions between the two. The last time I can think of warring factions like this was all the way back in Ruby and Sapphire, and those games never had the direct political intrigue of this game. These clans are the closest the Pokemon has ever gotten to genuine societal conflict. That's not to say they're perfect, they basically don't have any major differences besides the leader that they like. My religion has more subscribers than yours, my god's cooler than yours. That's basically all it boils down to, and the game kind of knows it, and even the leaders of these clans kind of know that. The game never even pretends that these clans won't find peace somehow, and if you've played Diamond and Pearl at all, or have any knowledge of Dialga and Palkia, the box art legendaries of the previous game, the tie-in game to this one, then you know that these two clans are going to realize that the true almighty Sinnoh are actually two Pokemon, and both of them were right. The story is never tense in any way, but for a Pokemon game, I think that fits best. This is still a children's franchise, and having deep, politically and religiously opposed fundamentalist factions would just kinda muddle the message. The message being that in the same way the Diamond and Pearl clans can find a way to mend their differences and coexist, so can humans and Pokemon. So can humans and nature. And for a Pokemon story, I think that's all it really needs to do. That being said, the game really does try and take itself a bit more seriously and be a little bit more grim at times. And I do really appreciate it. Lines like "try not to get mauled by Pokemon," or "my hometown was burned to the ground by Pokemon," or a general telling you straight up, "try not to die," in dire circumstances make this feel at least less like I'm being talked down to, like my intelligence is respected a little more. It never teeters into edgy or serious territory, but I don't really feel like I'm playing a kid's game when reading the story. Unfortunately, there's still no voice acting, and it has a somewhat repetitive structure. It seems like it came together as the writers were going along. But nonetheless, it's an engaging story, with the best moments coming from the fully animated cutscenes of noble Pokemon and legendaries. I can also tell you right now that my enjoyment of this story doesn't come from the fan service either. Some of my favorite characters are the originals to this game with no ties to the ancestry of Diamond and Pearl. But some of the characters that get the most development are the new ones like Adamant and Iridia. That being said, the characters with effectively reused character designs do more with the main story than just exist to be ancient counterparts for marketing purposes. They're often endearing in new ways, some ways that hint at the future events of Diamond and Pearl, but also in some ways that strengthen their characters in their own unique ways, unique to this story. The story presentation is already far above the average Pokemon game, but the visual presentation isn't all that far behind either. The game takes on the appearance of an ancient Japanese watercolor painting, with rolling clouds and softly colored distant mountains. In fact, the entire color palette is very soft, with light greens and blues all over the place, even in darker or warmer areas. The direct parallels to Breath of the Wild are not lost on me, however, but this game takes that style or takes that method of making a world and makes it its own. It's not a direct copy or a direct ripoff like, say, Genshin Impact might be. I'm not knocking anybody who plays Genshin Impact, but it's pretty undeniable what the inspiration for all of the world design was in that game. Pokemon Legends takes its inspiration more from ancient Japanese watercolor paintings as opposed to Breath of the Wild's landscape impressionism. It manages to sell a solid amount of wild detail, especially on a game that runs at 1080p 30 FPS on Switch. A high resolution that is unable to hide some of the lack of detail or blemishes here and there. I genuinely stop and just look around because it can be a little breathtaking at times, even if it's not quite as technologically impressive as Breath of the Wild or Xenoblade 2. Each area has its own distinct style and theme. You have your grasslands and forest area, but also a swamp with ancient ruins in it, a beach with a volcano in the ocean calling back to Stark Mountain, and the entirety of Mount Coronet to explore, even though the inner dungeon is only one small hallway this time. Yeah, the Mount Coronet theme doesn't get to play long at all. Damn shame, too. Again, that's not that Legends Arceus is technically impressive or even all that artistically impressive in terms of its graphics, but I think the overall art direction, as well as just what they did with the graphics in general, come together and form something more than the sum of its parts, in my opinion. And if less overall texture detail and some lower quality meshes all around means that we get a steady 30 FPS at 1080p, I'm perfectly okay with that trade. I will point out the game uses a dynamic resolution system, but it actually has no bilinear filtering or anti-aliasing on the pixels at all, so you get this weird shimmering stair-stepping effect if the resolution ever scales down from 1080p at all. And it can look pretty jarring and awkward when that happens. It's something that when I do a stream or I record something with pixel art, I try and always make it so that you get either perfect pixels or some sort of bilinear filtering. But here, there's none of that, and it looks weird. And while there's not a jarring amount of pop-in overall, the game definitely could have used some higher quality meshes or done more with low-quality meshes in the distance of like trees or rocks or Pokemon, because sometimes, yeah, the pop-in can look pretty bad. Considering everything, I'd say the visuals are the weakest element of the game, but not by a lot. It doesn't look much worse than Breath of the Wild to me, and yeah, I've played Breath of the Wild at 4K 60 and it looks really nice. Nothing ever looks photorealistic or ultra-detailed, but nothing ever looks bad. It's a step up from Sword and Shield, which is not saying much, but that's also saying it's not looking terrible. And I'll touch on the music here, but because it's something I'm not quite as qualified to talk about, I don't want to go too much in depth on it. I'll say it's really good. A lot of it involves remixes from Diamond and Pearl, and a lot of it involves these new Breath of the Wild inspired pieces with piano all over the place. In the wild, there's mostly just transition pieces when you're being sneaky around a Pokemon or a Pokemon spots you, or you're transitioning from day to night. Only when you're really battling does the music come out, or if there's some major story event like climbing up Mount Coronet or the ending. That being said, I can't help but be giddy at all of the remixes that are in the game. The gym battle theme, the trainer battle theme, even the new Pokemon battling theme, the Mount Coronet. When I heard the guitar being revved up in the trainer battle theme, I just stop and I just listen to it for like 5 minutes. I just listened to the intro of the trainer battle theme for like 5 minutes. It's just sick guitar. Sorry, I can't be as deep or in-depth with music. It's just, I just want to gush. But that's just all presentation stuff. Music, graphics, story. How does the game actually play? Legends isn't entirely the direction I could see Gen 9 going, but there's so many quality of life changes and additions to the Pokemon gameplay formula that I kind of never want to go back from here anyways. The Pokedex is the linchpin of progression in this game. It ties into levels, story progression, quests, team building, battling, everything. It's such an all-encompassing part of the game, God ordains you to complete it before the game even starts. You'll no longer need to only catch a Pokemon to complete the entry. You must catch multiple, defeat many in battle, watch them use specific moves either as your own or in the wild, and you'll even need to feed them sometimes. The game might tell you to defeat or catch a Pokemon 1, 3, 10, 25 different times, but you'll only need to do, like, maybe 5 to 10 of all of the things on the checklist before the Pokedex entry is considered complete. It never turns into a grind, you just need to get their Dex entry to level 10. I've never had to actively keep track of what earns a Dex entry enough points to get to the next level. I've just had to use the Pokemon over time or keep catching them in order to complete the entry. For each individual Pokemon, getting a completed Dex entry is easy enough, but completely filling out every task in the Pokedex in its entirety will be a daunting feat for anyone. It's enough content to carry this game to over 100 hours, and it's not something I've done yet because I have a job in college. Because it's so important, the game is constantly finding ways to get you to complete it either actively or passively. Because doing just about anything with Pokemon fills in an entry, be it battling with or against them, or using the multiple strategies you have for catching them, quests and exploration tie naturally into completing the Pokedex. Many quests will have you show someone a Pokemon or give one away, while others ask for a level 10 Dex entry. Often these quests will point players in the right direction as to where a Pokemon even is, while sometimes it's just about keeping players on the lookout for some so they still prioritize catching and exploration. Just looking around new areas naturally leads to more Pokemon to find and catch, so players who enjoy the sheer joy of discovery will have a new reason to catch Pokemon around them. That, and it's just straight up fun to catch Pokemon in this game, rather than running into a wild Pokemon and entering a battle scene to then be able to weaken it and catch it from there. The player can simply throw a Pokeball at hitting a Pokemon from the back, or using different balls with different properties, like ones that fly farther or ones that have a higher catch rate than regular Pokeballs, but they're very heavy so you can't throw them very far. On top of that, there is a constant looming threat that any wild Pokemon has the ability to just straight up murk the trainer. Regardless of how many Pokemon in your party are still able to fight, you, the trainer, can be attacked directly, and you'll white out if you take too much damage either from a high fall or from a Pokemon's attack. There are some Pokemon that don't mind you being around them, there are some that run away, and there are some that will actively fight you, and when they try and fight you, you have to fight back with your Pokemon. You can't throw Pokeballs at them. From there, the battle system plays like every other Pokemon game, for the most part with meaningful additions like the new style system, the new speed system, and the reworked buff system. From there, you can deal damage and inflict status effects to increase the catch rate. From there, it's a matter of chucking balls, in the same manner as the old games. I'm really glad that they didn't necessarily remove this old battle system and this old catching system, because it makes legendary battles a lot more fun for at least me in particular. I really like the endurance test, where I have to keep chucking balls at a legendary Pokemon that has to stay alive, that I can't kill, while it's constantly throwing out attacks and status effects at my team. It's a drawn-out kind of fight that Pokemon doesn't usually have and isn't ever explored in competitive. However, to make up for the new combat and catching systems, they actually changed the catch rate for pretty much every Pokemon in the game. You know how I just said that I like the endurance test that a legendary battle offers? Well, I caught every single legendary in this game in one Ultra Ball. Status effects and lowering their health increases the catch rate so much that every legendary fight and every encounter, even alpha Pokemon encounters, become pathetically easy if you want to catch them. Legends has completely overhauled the stat system and battle mechanics. Stats like speed now determine more than just who goes first. It determines how many turns you get before the other Pokemon can act, most similar to something like Final Fantasy X. Even outside the changes to stats, IVs, EVs, style system, the way status and buffs work, this one small change shifts the balance of Pokemon entirely. Pokemon that would be low tier in older games all of a sudden get a giant buff from this system that prioritizes fast Pokemon. A slow Pokemon that can tank hits is still going to be taking a ton of damage from a fast Pokemon with an even mediocre attack stat. It's harder to wall out other Pokemon, leading to building a team with Pokemon that are good at being more aggressive. Couple that with how stat buffs only last a limited number of turns, and can now only be raised once for both physical and special attacks at a time, the game balance has shifted entirely. On top of all of that, sheer levels don't seem to matter as much. I consistently run into Pokemon 30 levels weaker than me, and I'm not able to reliably one-shot them without type effectiveness or buffs. To me, it seems like the damage formula has been almost entirely rewritten, if not at least adjusted. Couple that with the new Alpha Pokemon, a direct rip of Xenoblade's unique monster system, Pokemon who outpace the level curve and get buffs throughout the fight, you get fights that are pretty consistently challenging and sometimes even unfair. There are points where it felt like the game was cheating against me, and to me, let me be clear, that's a positive. That kind of uncertainty and difficulty is what I enjoy so much about games like Dark Souls and Xenoblade. Am I about to call this the Dark Souls of Pokemon? No, not even a little. I also want to touch on the Alpha Pokemon system for a minute. I mentioned that it was a direct rip of Xenoblade's unique monster system, and I feel like I should clarify that. Xenoblade had a system where some monsters in the game were much higher level and had unique names. These monsters had their own special moves and generally had a stat buff compared to everything else. It was also used as a sort of super boss system where you could have some monsters that were far, far, far beyond the level curve, like, for example, Immovable Gonzalez, which is just level 99 in the first area. There's literally nothing stopping you from simply walking into these monsters and just dying. And believe it or not, I think that's one of the most appealing things about the system in the first place. It genuinely makes you feel like you can't trust your surroundings. It makes you feel tense all the time. It makes you feel like at any moment, a dinosaur could come up and just eat you. You're no longer the apex predator at the top of the food chain. There are other things that are stronger than you and will be stronger than you unless you grind in the postgame. Having this sort of system in Pokemon, where there are tons of extremely powerful Pokemon that you shouldn't really be fighting, it's both a benefit and a detriment. Because you can catch all of these Pokemon, you can use that level 85 Garchomp you find against literally whatever you want. If you've made enough progress on your Pokedex and have kept reporting that progress to Captain Silene, you're able to use all of these super powerful Pokemon at no extra cost or consequence. For players who are brave enough to try and fight and catch them, they're rewarded with completely outpacing the level curve. This is exclusively why I had an easy time with this game. And not only do they drop a bunch of really good items, not only are they themselves super powerful, but they give more experience than the average Pokemon, and they drop experience candies, which helps the rest of your team completely outpace the level curve. They even give experience and drop XP candies when you catch them, meaning you don't even necessarily have to fight them. If you can simply luck out and catch one in battle without your entire team wiping, or manage to sneak up behind it with some heavy balls, you can become overpowered extremely quickly in this game. On the flip side, on your first playthrough and when you don't know that you can just catch them or it just doesn't click in your brain, these Pokemon can be genuinely terrifying. It's a really scary experience to walk up to a Pokemon with big glowing red eyes that is way bigger than everything else in the area, and you've still only got a level 10 Pokemon. Even when I know that I can simply walk past the thing, seeing that level 85 Garchomp or that level 70 Lucario is still scary. Having that element of fear there is going to turn off a lot of players automatically from trying to catch them. Players at the beginning of the game are outright discouraged from interacting with alpha Pokemon at all. More than anything, they're treated as a threat to be avoided. So, through a little bit of play conditioning, some players just simply won't interact with them or catch them at all. And the players who don't catch the alpha Pokemon I found have been on track with the level curve far more than I was. And this is all just browsing through a couple of streams, of course. That's not to say after the midpoint the game was never difficult. There are still higher level alphas and legendaries to hunt, but I wonder what my run would have been like if I had done a self-imposed level cap of some way. Thankfully, the game actually seemed to have heard my plight here. Once again, the Pokedex comes to the rescue. You can keep catching Pokemon and gaining experience, but new quests and items open up based on how far you are in the story, not the Pokedex. The game separates Pokedex progression from story progression, and you're allowed to level up your Pokedex rank level by level, rather than be forced to open the cap up to 70 or something if you don't really want to. This means there's an in-game level cap system that the player has complete control over. They developed a system that at least accommodates self-imposed restrictions, giving players more sanctioned control over how difficult they want the game to be. This means that even if you catch a level 70 alpha or something without fighting it, you can't use it until you progress your Pokedex further, which likely means you're going to have to progress the story further. So this can be the most difficult Pokemon game, forcing you under strict level caps and preventing you from sweeping everything with alphas, and forcing you to use weak items unless you want to blow all your money on Great Balls and Hyper Potions as opposed to saving it for learning a new move or something more valuable. On the flip side, it can also be one of the easiest Pokemon games, giving you constant access to super high level Pokemon that you just have no consequences for using if you're completing your Pokedex at a rapid pace. It's really not a perfect system, but this level cap combined with the abundance of experience candies lets you effectively have complete control over what level you want your team to be throughout the adventure. No, it's not as YouTube clickable as a Nuzlocke mode, but it makes effective use of how levels inherently give you more control over the difficulty of the game you're playing, letting you tailor the difficulty to be exactly how you want it to and exactly how is most fun for you. And that's what I think Legends Arceus does. It balanced the game around me being excessively over-leveled. Despite my levels, Pokemon still do the same amount of damage to the trainers, legendaries aren't available in the post-game, and levels mean less overall in terms of total strength. And even then, I somehow stayed on track of the average levels in the final area anyways, with post-game stuff being higher level than me despite previous hours. I should also point out that there is a direct disincentive in this game in particular to keep going back to the Pokemon Center or the base of operations. PP Restore berries are far more abundant, and the game is constantly throwing berries and plants at the player that allow them to craft healing items such as potions or revives. Coupled with the real-time gameplay systems and the fact that if they go back to the base camp, they're likely going to lose sight of that rare Pokemon they saw, players are disincentivized from constantly running back to safety. To top that all off, the game actually seems to be incredibly well balanced in terms of how much it doles out those craftable resources. Without spending money, players are going to be consistently around 1 to 2 revives and maybe 4 to 5 potions. This means that players are going to be always on edge, that if they get into a huge scrape, it's going to cost a lot of precious resources. But the game also always keeps health and PP restore items at such close reach that players never really feel the need to go back to the base camp if they're not getting into huge trouble. The game is incredibly good at keeping you at a comfortable pace, but you'll never be unkillable. and when the game wants to get difficult, it will get pretty difficult. This means that the game moves at a fairly steady clip, and players can go at whatever pace they really want to, so long as they're not horrible at the game. It is kind of an incredible balancing act that they perform there, that I am in shock that they managed to keep so well. Of course, this is just my experience with the game, and other players, I'm sure, are going to have a different experience with that, but of course, this is all my experience. I'm under no illusions that the game is perfect. Trust me, it's not perfect. Being 30 levels above the curve is not great. It gets back on track by the end of the game, but the game really did go off the rails with how much experience it was handing me in the mid-game. I could have simply turned away all that experience, but I didn't, and I was over-leveled. I had a much easier time with the game than players who are going to rush through it or do major experience management. Then again, the easy time I had with the game wasn't overall that easy, considering levels don't mean as much anymore. And actually, they might mean about the same as they used to. I'm not a pokey mathematician. I don't have the raw numbers on this like some of the people who work on PK Hex might already have by the time this video comes out. Again, it's from my own personal experiences that the game treats levels as less than it used to. I'd like to stop and talk a minute about the quests. The quest system by itself, apart from how it affects the game balance, I just love how it is. It's most similar to a Xenoblade game's quest system where you're given quests and you're told how to do them and they're listed in a big chart. I bring up Xenoblade specifically because that game let you complete quests if you simply had the prerequisite item in your inventory. Quests are designed in a way that act more as a simple reward for exploring and completing the Pokedex, an extension of the gameplay loop, rather than being padding. Other games would have you do that same content over again just because that's the quest and that's how you have to do it, but Xenoblade, and now by extension Pokemon Legends Arceus, just lets you hand in the item that you already have. There's no key item that appears on the field once you start the quest. You just give them the thing that you have, like a nice person would. If somebody asks you for it, well, you should give it to them. But on the flip side, if you don't have that item yet, this NPC has now alerted you to an item that you might want. There's now this thing that exists, be it an item or a Pokemon out in the wild, that you're going to go find now. You're going to keep an eye out for that once that NPC has brought that up. Because of this system, exploring and engaging with the gameplay loop is both encouraged and rewarded through quests, and I think it's an absolutely genius system. That's pretty standard for quest systems nowadays in every RPG, but what I really love about them is how in-depth a lot of them can be. Even quests that are just get me a Geodude or get me a Wurmple or complete this Pokedex entry is spiced up with more context and story behind it. There's a guy who wants a Wurmple, not just because he wants a Wurmple, but because he wants to see it evolve into a Beautifly, and he's all jazzed up to see it become a Beautifly. He names it Beautiful or something, and then as the game progresses, you get to see it turn into a Cascoon instead of a Silcoon, and then it turns into a Dustox as his dreams are crushed. And there's another quest where one of the main shops in town is taken over by someone you had to interact with on the main quest, and then you start doing things for them and their character starts to develop. The shopkeeper has you do quests and give items to somebody to get more items in the shop, but it's not just that, there's also drama between the two people you're interacting with for these quests that unfolds as the game progresses. It's this narrative sleight of hand that the game does that lets these characters all across the town have this character development throughout the entire game. One person you'll talk to at the beginning of the game says something different at the end, and there's been character development there. It's something that you'll probably recognize from Sonic Adventure and its adventure fee. Have to bring it back to Sonic. Everything leads back to Sonic. Everything. He is inevitable. It's something that was pioneered by writer Yuji Horii, which he did in Dragon Quest I, and kept doing in all of his games, including Dragon Quest XI and Chrono Trigger. It's this thing where you have a character mention that their son or their brother went off to this town many years ago, and then you go meet them in that next town. It's both character development and sleight-of-hand world building. And it's kind of amazing. The fact that I'm here talking about a Pokemon game and comparing it to the narrative chops of Chrono Trigger and Xenoblade when it comes to its side quests should really highlight something about this game for you. It's really special when I know that this game gives me a quest then in the field, let's say, that I know is going to give me another base camp to rest at, but it then turns into a touching story about two friends or something. And none of these stories ever go deep at all. They never go more than like a few lines of dialogue or something just simple, some simple drama across the whole game. But it doesn't really have to do more than that to keep my attention for at most a 5-minute side quest. But that's all optional content we're talking about. The main story had me gripped from top to bottom, and it did all of the lore of the Sinnoh region total justice, and I couldn't be happier. Diamond and Pearl were the first games I played, Diamond specifically, so I have a lot of fondness for Dialga and Palkia. The lore surrounding the Pokemon that are the gods of creation, Dialga, Palkia, and Arceus, are really interesting to me. And I guess now that I'm drawing attention to them, yeah, I know it's actually pronounced Arceus, because it's arcane and deus. It's mind-blowing. Especially playing Platinum and learning about the darker underworld king, Giratina, really enthralled me with Sinnoh's lore. I never got to the end game as a kid, but I did recently. I did specifically when these games were all announced. And yeah, the legendaries of Sinnoh are truly special fights. They're these regal-looking beasts. Dialga, a dragon of steel, and Palkia, a dragon of water, with Giratina being a ghost dragon. The entire game builds up to the fight with Dialga and Palkia. The two clans constantly mention their deity, legendary Sinnoh, who we know now as both Dialga and Palkia. The game never misses a beat in preparing you for that ultimate climax. Mount Coronet can be seen from every corner of the map, very much akin to Breath of the Wild's Hyrule Castle. There's this giant space-time distortion floating over the center of the region at all times. It's this giant, obvious looming threat that is the source of all of the troubles coming to the Hisui region, and it never leaves you alone. There are statues throughout Mount Coronet, or the Coronet Highlands as the game calls it, of Dialga and Palkia. Every last one of the wardens and even members of the Diamond and Pearl clan have their own unique ways of worshipping their deity, of doing their best to pay respect. While there is only the one town, Jubilife Village, the culture of Hisui is never understated, it's never underdeveloped. They're never treated as full towns, but you are able to find the settlements of the Diamond and Pearl clans respectively, even the areas where the leaders live. You'll even find Jinko guild merchants just wandering around. It's revealed that Cynthia's ancestor is a part of the guild merchants, and they help you along your journey in the main game, but mostly in the post-game. I'd really like to take a moment to highlight the grand fight between Dialga and/or Palkia. You have a split at the endgame where you're able to go with Adaman or Iridia, the leader of the Diamond or Pearl clan respectively, and depending on who you choose, you will take either Dialga or Palkia into your party to fight the origin form of the one that you didn't take with you. This origin form battle is a supercharged version of the noble Pokemon fights, and it's a lot of fun. What really elevates it though is the new remix for the Dialga and Palkia theme. It's styled after the Sword and Shield gym theme, and yeah, if you're imagining that being hype, it's even better than you think. The big downside is the new origin forms. God, they look ugly. I'm sorry, I I can't be positive about this one. I really do think that Dialga and Palkia's origin forms just do not fit them at all. Giratina's origin form is a more fitting remix of the elements that were already a part of the design. The color scheme was exactly the same, the crown was retained, and things like the wings were turned into big, long serpent-like fingers. Rather than being this six-legged, hulking elephant dragon thing, it turned into this ghost serpent. And seeing in the movies how ginormous it is, it's a legitimately terrifying Pokemon. The design approach they seemed to take with Dialga and Palkia's origin forms, however, was to make them look more like Arceus, and I can't say I agree. At very least, they didn't need to change the faces quite so drastically or alter the proportions in such weird ways. Like why does Palkia have muscular hooves? Why did it need to become a horse? Palkia was this intimidating kaiju dragon that lurched forward, ready to bite or shoot laser beams out of its mouth at any given moment. The horse Palkia, it's just really hard to make heads or tails of. Dialga's dangling Metagross arms and its big, bulging thrusty are just off-putting. Why does it have a foot-long Adam's apple diamond? It doesn't need that. Thankfully, I can't say the same about a lot of the other Hisuian forms. I really like Voltorb and Electrode. They're both these wooden Pokeballs in the styling of the Pokeballs that you actually use throughout the game. Zoroark is a normal ghost type, retaining its signature Shadow the Hedgehog edgy red, but mingling it with white and wavy lines all over its body. Zoro was as cute as ever, but Zoroark lurches forward as it walks and stalks, like a zombie, very befitting of its new ghost typing. Growlithe looks like a little sheepdog, and Arcanine gets a new fire flower pattering all over its body. Despite being super lanky, the new Sneasel and Sneasler evolution are pretty objectively better than Weavile in my opinion. I just like how it looks like a more grown-up version of Sneasel, and retains that asymmetry that Weavile got rid of. Ursaluna is this big, doofy bear that looks like it's got Wi-Fi coming out of it, and I like that a lot. It's just funny. Basculegion is probably the most metal Pokemon I've ever seen. Its Pokedex entry reads, "It clads itself in the souls of comrades that perished before fulfilling their goals of journeying upstream. No other species throughout all of Hisui's rivers is a Basculegion's equal." It literally uses the propulsive power of souls of dead Basculin to let it swim. It is so goddamn metal. Plus it's a water ghost type, with its type only being shared by Jellicent up until this point. Overall, the few new additions that are in the game that build upon Sinnoh's original dex, I think are really strong. But some of the most memorable Pokemon to return appear in the post-game. Finally, all of Sinnoh's Pokemon are available in one game, or at least all of the event Pokemon are available to just catch in Legends Arceus. Shaymin, Darkrai, and Arceus are just catchable. Arceus is the ultimate goal of the game, having you complete the Pokedex so you can finally confront and catch it, with the other Pokemon being either roaming legendaries or big story events in the post-game. Giratina has a reveal that I actually don't want to spoil because I think it's kinda cool. But needless to say, yes, they absolutely did Platinum specifically justice. The Platinum episode is in this game, and it is fantastic. There's even a huge twist that I don't know how I didn't expect, but I didn't. Overall, from actually looking at the structure of it, Legends' post-game is almost copied and pasted directly from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum's. In fact, you could make the argument that this whole game is simply an expansion on BDSP in many ways. I don't want to get too hooked up on BDSP specifically. I personally myself enjoyed it. I have problems with BDSP, but I think it's a worthwhile addition to the series and an overall improvement on Gen 4. However, the lack of the Platinum post-game and Platinum content like the Distortion World was sorely disappointing. If you wanted the Platinum expansion for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, Legends Arceus is it. Legends Arceus is that and so much more. It's so much more than it really needed to be. There were reports that the team behind Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl wanted to make the game a lot more open, similar to Sword and Shield's wild areas, but were held back so Game Freak could work on those ideas in Legends Arceus. And while I am a little disappointed that we didn't get to see a fully fleshed out modern Sinnoh, I'm so happy with what we have in this game that I'm really glad they got to take the time to finally finish working on a Pokemon game proper. They gave themselves the room to breathe with this one by outsourcing BDSP to ILCA, and it let the directors and the game designers behind Pokemon and Game Freak show what they can really do when they're given the right amount of breathing room. Yes, it's not perfect. The experience curve is wildly out of whack, even though they seem to have known that, and overall the game isn't quite as long or as ginormous as some other $60 games on Switch, like, I keep bringing them up, but Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade 2. Despite all of its shortcomings, it was incredibly fun to play and an incredibly worthwhile experiment. It makes me immediately wonder about the future of the series, with Generation 9 and possibly a Legends Unova. The small additions to the battle system, like the changes to Sleep and Freeze, are incredible. I didn't even really get a chance to talk about how Sleep now doubles or adds an extra 50% onto the damage that you take, and Freeze halves your special attack. It does the same thing to your special attack that Burn does to the physical attack, which I think is an incredible addition to the game. It changes how statuses affect the pacing of the game entirely. I didn't even mention the 2 different Korok systems in this game, the little bits of Spiritomb scattered across the entire region and the Unknown that you can find, both of which are also required to complete the Pokedex and thus meet Arceus. The overall scope and the focus on catching Pokemon above all else, as well as the focus on a much grander and more serious story, are the directions that I really would have wanted Pokemon to go a long time ago, and were finally here. Its shortcomings are relatively obvious to anybody willing to look for them, and it wears all of its influences, its many influences, on its sleeve, but god damn it, I just had so much fun with this one. It's really nice to play a Pokemon game that I can just wholeheartedly recommend as a good experience for once. I don't have to say I enjoy Sword and Shield or Let's Go for what they are. I don't have to say that I enjoy BDSP despite all of the vitriol it got. I can just say, yes, Legends Arceus is definitively a damn good game. And it is a damn fine foundation for the series moving forward.